At the core of Manresa Bread is our mill. We have been milling our own flour basically from the beginning. In 2018, we purchased a new American stone mill, which is what we use now. And that is a large 40-plus inch millstone that allows us to mill California grains. And the majority of our bread is at least 50% up to 100% fresh milled flour. And our pastry program also is very inspired by the grains and specifically the flavors of the flours that we're able to access. There are such a huge variety of flours, and that is why for us milling our own flour is so important, because the fresher the flour, and then additionally the fact that it's whole grain, maintains the flavor of that flour. And then I feel like our job as a bakery and as chefs is to evolve our recipes so that that flavor still comes through. We really try to delve deeper into each variety of flour. So at any given time, we typically have at least 5 different kinds of flour. When we think about formulating a recipe, we're going to ask ourselves, what are we trying to highlight? So rye is actually a really nice flour to utilize in pastry baking specifically, because most of the time in pastry baking, we're not trying to develop any kind of gluten. We're really trying to create typically like crumbly crusts or a very delicate cookie flavor for like a sablé. So in our rye strawberry tart, rye was the perfect flour to use because it's balanced in terms of flavor, because there's quite a bit of powdered sugar in the final recipe for the dough. And then I didn't want to take away flavor of the rye, so I didn't want to make it too sweet. I didn't add extra sugar, but I let it be kind of nutty and strong and somewhat assertive in flavor. But then I balanced by making the frangipane and the strawberries very sweet, and the strawberries were just naturally sweet on their own. But the frangipane, we added vanilla, which we typically wouldn't have vanilla in the frangipane specifically. We always put lemon zest in our frangipane, but for this pastry, I also added orange zest. So I think the orange and the vanilla and the lemon and the strawberry all balance that rye flavor. I wouldn't want to eat a big chunk of that dough by itself, but combined into that beautiful bite, everything kind of balances and comes together. We've been making Babka at Manresa Bread for, I would say, almost 5+ years. We chose to laminate our babka dough, so we incorporate actually 2 different kinds of fresh milled flour into the babka. It uses both natural leavening and a little bit of yeast. So there's a fair amount of fermented rye and wheat flour that goes in with the starter. Those flavors are really coming through just as the sourdough. It gives it an additional kind of richness and roundness to the flavor. And then we also incorporated our hard red wheat into the final dough. That's going to give it a kind of a creamier, darker color, and it's got a nutty flavor. Babka is an enriched dough. It has butter, sugar, eggs in it, so you can kind of be relatively assertive with something like the hard red wheat flour that has a strong flavor, because there's so many things that are going into the dough to sweeten it. To finally make the babka, we laminate it, but actually the dough before lamination is complete in and of itself. You can easily take our babka dough and simply roll it out, cut out a donut, proof it like you would normally proof any other donut, and bake it. And I think that's kind of a fun thing, that this dough, even without this addition of butter, can evolve even more in a completely different direction by simply skipping one step. Our babka gets filled with a chocolate filling. It has cocoa powder, chocolate, and cinnamon in it. And then there's orange zest in the dough. So all of those things are going to kind of balance. I like a lot of different flavors to come through rather than just sweet. And so I think that utilizing the fresh milled flour in our pastry program allows us to kind of play with those balances of flavor more that would otherwise maybe be a little bit more one note. And so I'm not necessarily aiming for every customer to walk into Manresa Bread and say, oh, wow, I can really taste this whole wheat. What I want them to say is, oh, wow, I've never had a babka that's this delicious. Or, oh, wow, this tart is amazing. Or this loaf of bread, I can't believe it's 100% whole grain because you've achieved such a beautiful crumb structure. We're not trying to be 100% fresh milled in everything. That's not kind of our goal. Our goal is to create something really beautiful that utilizes what is around us and that kind of asks of our team to engage. And I think that for me is, again, part of why we want to fresh mill things. It's a lot easier to open a bag of flour. It is one more step, but to me, I can taste the difference, and I think our customer can taste the difference. And it's kind of putting that continuous challenge out there for ourselves of how do we make this better? How do we keep growing?